So I'm somebody who spends all my time in the arena of women's development, right? It's a big passion of mine, and it takes the form of a couple of different buckets. The first bucket is doing research and writing and advocacy around women and transition. It's a topic that I think is kind of hiding in plain sight all around us, and it's something that I think actually has an opportunity to be an inflection point for a lot of women. So I do a ton of work on writing and talking about it, and I've just established a nonprofit that is dedicated to building the capacity for transition in women. The other thing I do kind of under my umbrella of women's development is I work with an organization called Golden Seeds, which is an angel capital network that is dedicated to funding entrepreneurial ventures that are led by women. And so, all about me is the fact that I'm dedicated to women and women's advancement, and it's something that I've been interested in my whole career, but it's something that I now dedicate myself full-time to.
Wonderful. And was there a specific event, or what prompted you to go from having the idea and the information into actually writing a book?
Sure. Well, I kind of came to the book by chance, right? So I did have kind of a large kind of transition that happened to me in my mid-40s. I was somebody who had long been kind of a high-achieving woman, right? I am a Harvard MBA. I was the CEO and founder of a venture capital-backed company, a tech company that was ultimately sold to Perot Systems. And then a gentleman who had served on my board of directors while I ran that company became the CEO of a large Fortune 500 company. It was called Iron Mountain. And at the time, it had 21,000 employees in 37 countries. And so he said, geez, why don't you come and help me re-architect this company? And I'd like you to serve in the role of head of HR and administration for the organization. And so I was like, oh, my God, how that sounds like a very interesting puzzle. I'd love to try that. At any rate, at the time, I also had 2 infants. And about 5 years after taking that job, I got to a point where, my entire life was unraveling, right? I could no longer continue in the vein that I was operating in, largely because there were a lot of clashes between my work world and my personal world. But I think even more importantly, kind of the image of this kind of corporate higher echelons kind of world that I had worked for 20 years to achieve was really ringing hollow, right? I was seats away from the CEO seat in the large company, and it really wasn't all that captivating, and I was kind of overcome by this thought that there must be something more for me. And I really looked and looked and looked for some research or tools to help me at the time, and I couldn't find them. And so I started to talk with other women. And what I learned from other women really astonished me, Althea. I heard an awful lot of qualifiers as I talked to other women. Some women were leading their own companies or had gotten to be entrepreneurs, as they had to exit an environment that was no longer suitable for them. Some women had part-time, some women had responsibilities for elder care, what have you. There was all sorts of things. But everywhere there was a qualifier. It was part-time or looking for something. There were all these unresolved issues, and it really inspired me to do some more research as to what was going on. And as I looked into that, that's how I found transition. And I was captivated by it. I've learned that, transition occurs when what holds value and meaning to us begins to shift. And all sorts of things can trigger that shift. It can be a job loss or retirement or marriage or a new child, all sorts of things, a change in health status, all sorts of things can kind of initiate a process of transition. But what I learned is that transition is widely misunderstood in our society, and as a result, the skill sets to navigate it are underdeveloped. And that kind of inspired me, I guess, to write a book. And I think the other thing, Althea, that I'll mention is that as I listened, right, I ultimately interviewed more than 200 women from all walks of life. And as I listened to them tell their transition stories, I was struck by how often, when women didn't have knowledge of transition, very often they misinterpreted the early stages of transition as failure instead of as growth. And that really broke my heart and got me kind of connected to it in ways that are really exciting and enlivening for me. But it really is the thing that kind of drives me forward to make sure that I do two things with this book. One is to raise awareness of what transition is so that people can recognize it and you know, and be positive and drive it instead of being, you know, reactive to it. And the other is to provide people with knowledge of the tools that are out there that they can use to transition successfully.
Amazing.